As the Israelites journeyed through the desert, they began to complain. They were tired of eating manna and wanted meat like they had when they were slaves in Egypt. Frustrated by their complaining, God gave the Israelites exactly what they wanted. A huge wind blew an enormous flock of quail right into their camp. They had so much quail, they ate it for every meal for a month. It was literally coming out of their nostrils. Not long after this, the Israelites continued their journey toward the Promised Land. They came to the outskirts of a city called Canaan. Moses sent spies ahead to see if the city was a good place to live and how tough the battle might be to take it over. The spies came back and told him the land was amazing, flowing with milk and honey and all kinds of fruit. But the people living there were huge, like giants, and that it would be impossible to defeat them. But two of the spies, Joshua and Caleb, told the Israelite leaders they should go into Canaan because God was on their side. The leaders refused, becoming so angry at Joshua and Caleb that they almost executed them. Because the Israelites didn't believe that God would help them, God sent them to wander in the desert for 40 years. In the desert, the Israelites were having trouble finding water and began to complain. So God told Moses to speak to a rock and water would flow from it. Moses trusted God, but only partly. He not only spoke to the rock, but struck it with his walking stick. When he did, water gushed from the rock. God wasn't happy with Moses' lack of trust and punished him by allowing him to see the Promised Land, but not enter it. Moses was getting pretty old and looked for someone to take over for him as leader. He chose Joshua. Just before he died, Moses stood before the entire nation of Israel and told them the story of how God had promised land to Abraham, freed them from slavery in Egypt, and had even given them commands to live by as God's special people. When he finished, Moses climbed a nearby mountain. God showed him all of the promised land, and Moses died.
Trip, and it should be a short trip, but things happen along the way. So I want you to take out your book, the story, and we're going to start reading in chapter 6. And I want to read this little passage to you right in the beginning because I find this really interesting. It's called The Wandering, and it says, the people marched out from their year-long campout near Mount Sinai, organized units grouped according to the 12 tribes, named after the 12 sons of Jacob. God continued to guide them with a cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. He had rescued his people from slavery, showed them his power, guided their steps, given them his laws, and gifted them with his presence. By now, perhaps, the people would trust God and his leading, but the Israelites continued to blame God for their hardship. You know, and that's a hard thing. You know, when God has taken his people on this trip, they start blaming him. You know, God had heard all their prayers in Egypt. And the prayers was, God, help us. We are going through so much hardship as slaves in Egypt. And God heard their cries. And he brings the deliverer, Moses, to get them out of Egypt, to take them out of the bondage of slavery, and to give them freedom. And now they're on this trip to the Promised Land. But now they're complaining. Now they're complaining. And it's just an interesting thing because people have short memory. And God's presence is with them. They've seen the miracles. And it's so amazing to me that these people would still grumble and still complain. So point number one, when you're going on a road trip, these are some things for you to remember on the road trip. Number one, keep calm, no drama. Keep calm, no drama. Is that a good plan? Do you want to keep drama? Especially if it's a long trip. You don't want a lot of drama in the car, right? You don't want a lot of drama going on. But these people, there's 2 million people. Can you imagine Moses? How frustrated he must have been. 2 million people grumbling. That's all of Sacramento going on this long journey, with Moses. And there is drama. And they start complaining to Moses about all kinds of things. Turn to Numbers chapter 11, verses 1 to 3. And it says this. Now the people complained about their hardship in the hearing of the Lord. And when he heard them, his anger was aroused. Then fire from the Lord burned among them and consumed some of the outskirts of the camp. Can you imagine? God is pretty upset. Things are starting to boil on the outskirts of the camp. Can you imagine that? Would you be scared? Would you be fearful? Would you just really shut up and not say anything? But no, these people continue to grumble. And it says this. When the people cried out to Moses, he prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. So that place was called Taberah, because fire from the Lord had burned among them. And Moses had to continue to pray to God for his people, because they were complainers, they were grumblers, they had so much drama. And one of the things I remember hearing as a young Christian, that this story of deliverance, that God took his people out of Egypt and coming out from becoming slaves to freedom, they really didn't have it together. See, in our lives, there's some of you who've gone through so much drama in your childhood, because we talked about that everyone is from some sort of dysfunctional family. Is that true? You may not admit it, but I'm telling you, all of us have some sort of dysfunction. And this is the problem. When we have lived in so much dysfunction and so much chaos, it becomes normal. It becomes normal to complain. They complained all the time in Egypt. They complained about everything. They whined to the Lord then, and God heard their cries and took them out. But now that they're on their way to the Promised Land, 11-day trip to the Promised Land, they're still complaining. Because they're not satisfied. Because to them, when things are going good, when things are going well, they start thinking negative thoughts. They're still thinking that, hey, this is not normal. The shoe is about to fall off. You guys get that? And some of you have gone through so much struggle in your life that chaos is normal. And these people that are coming out of Egypt, God had to give them the law to train them, to change their thinking, so that they would understand what they're supposed to do and not do. And God was trying to teach them. He was testing them. But they still didn't get it. So they continued to have drama in their life, and they complained. Now I looked up the word complain in the dictionary, and it says this: to express feelings of pain, dissatisfaction, or resentment. And that was the attitude that they were having towards God. And then the second definition is to make a formal accusation, to bring a formal charge. And they were charging God for their misery. They were blaming God for their misery, because they could not take the blame for themselves, what they're going through, because they just wanted to complain. And I just want to let you know, if you are used to chaos and things are going well, don't create drama. Don't create drama for your life, because things are going good. That should be normal. When God is with you, things should be going well, and that you can deal with all the struggles and pain. But you don't have to create drama. There's plenty of drama already, is it? Is that true? There's plenty of drama. People will bring drama to you. You don't need to create drama yourself. Okay, but that's what was happening. They started to grumble, to complain. They started to accuse the Lord, and a rebellion started. And so they continued to complain, and then they started complaining about the food. We saw this in the summary, but they started complaining about the food. In Numbers 11, verse 4, it says this: the rabble with them began to crave other foods. And again the Israelites started wailing and said, if only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. Also the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna. They said, manna, manna, manna. And it was a special thing. Can you imagine that God was providing them the food that they needed? They didn't have to pay for it. It was free. But they're saying, hey, the food was better back in Egypt. They wanted to go back to where they thought it was comfortable. They would rather be slaves than to be free and with the Lord. They would rather go back to that. And that's an amazing thing for me to think about. That to them, that is normal to be a slave and to have the dysfunction and to complain and whine. And they got free fish. And you know, it sounds like a salad, a really bad salad, but that's what they were wanting. They wanted something more tasty than the manna that they would collect every day. And God provided them all the food that they needed with the manna. All they had to do was collect it in the morning. They would use it for that day, and it would last. So every day they would provide that. You know, on the 6th day they would gather up for the 7th day because there was a day of rest, the Sabbath. And so, but God provided that. But they wanted more. They wanted more. They wanted to complain. Verse 7. The manna was like coriander seed and looked like resin. The people went around gathering it and then ground it into hand mill or crushed it into a mortar. They cooked it in a pot or made it into loaves, and it tasted like something made with olive oil. When the dew settled on the camp at night, the manna also came down. Moses heard the people of every family wailing at the entrance of their tents. The Lord became exceedingly angry, and Moses was troubled. Moses was troubled. Can you imagine? They all were just at their tent complaining. All we eat is manna, manna, manna. I mean, it sounds like they could make all kinds of delicious things with it, but they just were not satisfied with what God was providing. And it made God angry. Look at verse 11. He asked the Lord, "Why have you brought this trouble on your servants? What have I done to displease you that you have put the burden of all these people on me? Did I conceive all these people? Did I give them birth? Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant to the land you promised as an oath to their ancestors? Where can I get meat for all these people? They keep wailing to me, 'Give us meat to eat.' I cannot carry all these people by myself. The burden is too heavy for me. If this is how you are going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me. If I have found favor in your eyes, and do not let me face my own ruin." And so Moses was just pleading to God, I am so tired of all these 2 million people complaining and grumbling, because he had to try to satisfy them. And God was not happy with the people because they were not satisfied. And so God had to do that. And then Moses continued to have problems. He had problems with Miriam and Aaron. They complained about Moses being the driver. He was in charge. And they're saying, how come Moses is in charge? You know, Moses didn't want to be in charge at this point. He said, anyone who wants it, they could have it, because there was so much trouble. But then people were complaining about him being the leader and being in charge. And there was like mutiny. And so God had to put a stop to that also, because Moses was God's chosen man to lead these people. And Miriam got the brunt of it. Aaron skidded safely, but Miriam got leprosy. And she had to stay out of the camp for 7 days to show her that her gossiping and her complaining was no good against Moses, who was God's man. And God protected Moses from that. And so our whining, our complaining needs to stop. No more drama. Can you guys say that? No more drama. Okay, that sounds like murmuring. Okay, sounds murmuring. Okay, grumbling. Okay, let's say it again. No more drama. That's something that I want to encourage you as a church. If God is with us, why do we need to create drama? God is with us to help us with all the things that we need to face. You don't have to worry. And I think that's what made God so angry, is that these people did not have faith in Him. God had provided them with everything they needed, but they wanted something